What is up, family and friends? Welcome back to the Family Bible Study, and we are kicking off yet another section on the book of James. So I want to welcome everybody. Maybe this is your first time tuning in, and of course, welcome you guys back who've been following this study. And as you know, it's this very slowed down Bible study, and we're in no hurry. So we've been on this last section of the book of James 4, I should say chapter James, the last section of the fourth chapter of James. I'll put it that way. These last couple of weeks, and so we're going to dive in. I always take the time to mention if you'd like more content, if you're working on something, or if there's a particular area in your life that you need to hear some good content, some good word on to build your faith up. There is the Faith, Hope, Love initiative channel on YouTube, which is something I've compiled it's actually called the FHL initiative channel, and the link, of course, is in the description. So I'd recommend you to that because there's a lot of sections, a lot of ministries that I have put on there, and I've broken them down into life categories. So if you're dealing with a specific thing in life, there's some great stuff. And one of my favorite things, there's testimonies on there, people who have dealt with maybe similar things that you're dealing with and have got through it by the grace of God and through faith. And it's encouraging to hear testimonies about people who have overcome what you're currently going through. And so I cannot encourage you enough on that. But for time's sake, we are going to dive right in, which, by the way, on the FHL Initiative channel, there is personal content from me, but there are playlists, and the playlist is where you can find those category-specific, different ministries, like I said, different just different things on there that you can look into. But anyway, I'll leave that up to you. So, a lot to cover, so we're going to dive in. This is a little different these last couple of weeks. The Lord had given me, I always call it a download. I was in church one day, just listened to the message, and He started to give me revelation on this particular section of James that we're on. And that's not typical. Usually these Bible studies, I just take the Word and we start going through it and just listen for whatever the Lord has to say as we go through the Bible study. But these last couple of weeks, and including today, I've been reading through what I pre-typed, what I had received from the Lord, typed up, and so now I'm going through that. And so we're gonna, and it's of course still along the lines of James 4:13 through 17 specifically is what we're on. So let me read James 4:13 through 17, and then we will get back to breaking this down what I pre-typed. Okay, so James 4:13 through 17. This is the NASB 1995 version, and it says, "Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city and spend a year there and engage in and engage in business and make a profit. Yet you do not know what your life will be like tomorrow. You are just a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and also do this or that. But as it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. Therefore, to one who knows the right thing to do and does not do it, to him it is sin." Okay, so ultimately what we've broken down over these last few weeks as we've looked at this passage is you and I are either going to be self-reliant or we're going to be God-reliant. We're either going to rely on ourselves to make our own decisions, to use what we can calculate, we can see, what we can think to make decisions, or we're going to learn to go to God and ask Him and wait for Him to direct us and to guide us. And He does that through lots of different ways, and we talked about that in previous broadcasts, so I won't go into that today, but I would strongly recommend if you have if that piques an interest in you to go back and go through those broadcasts, because it's very important. Ultimately, the question is, are we going to place our faith in ourselves, or are we going to place our faith in God? That's the most bottom line. Now, that always sounds nice and easy and succinct, but the honest truth is, when I was growing up in the world of church and so on, I really did not know how to define faith. I wasn't really sure what faith was. And so if I'm going to rely on faith to plan my future versus just making my own plans and saying, well, I think I'm going to get a job over here and, create some money, get some savings, and I think after that, maybe I'd like to move to this place or that place or upgrade my car, or, maybe if you got kids, then we're going to go on a family vacation this next year, and then we're going to do this. And, making all these plans, if you have someone that doesn't know God at all, they pay no attention to God, maybe they may be totally atheists, or they just don't know and they just don't pay any attention to God, and I know, that's exactly how they make plans. They make plans based on what they can calculate, what they can see, what they think, their opinions, and what they can predict. Well, if we're people who call Jesus Lord, which is like to say our boss, or you're over me and I listen to you, we should not make our plans and run our lives exactly like the next door neighbor, whoever who doesn't know God at all, or the coworker or whoever who doesn't know God at all, and especially not the financial gurus and business gurus and life gurus, so to speak, that are on social medias and YouTubes and all these different things that they're giving us advice on how to live our life. We want to live our lives differently, and we have the opportunity to based on knowing someone that knows everything, which is God, of course. And so, but that's all great, but we have to learn to connect with that. How do I bring that into my own life? What is faith? How do I operate by faith? And that's extremely important to learn. And I think, there's always more to be learned about it. There's always new levels and better understanding and all that different stuff. Granted, but it doesn't mean that we have to be ignorant, and it doesn't mean that we should be in a position we just don't know how to operate in it at all. We can, everything now, everything you know how to do, your job, how to eat a bowl of cereal, how to brush your teeth, you're not born knowing any of that stuff. You had to learn it. And especially most of us can relate in school. We went through school, we didn't know certain things when we walked in the door. By the time we walked out of those doors, there were certain things we knew how to do. Higher education, obviously the same. And also job occupations. A lot of times we get a job, they train us on the job, and we know we learn a skill. Well, if we can learn all those things, it stands to reason that we can start with spiritual things and have zero proficiency. We don't know how to operate in faith. We don't know how to hear the voice of God. We don't know how to do these things. But given time, effort, energy, focus, attention, we can learn those things, not just in our head where we have a formula figured out, but how to actually operate in them. And more or less, that's what we've been talking about these last few weeks. Now, I gave an analogy I'll probably refer to, so I'm going to give that analogy again. And essentially, the analogy, making it very simple, was suppose that you had a very wealthy father who loves you, and he put in a huge vault everything you were ever going to need for the rest of your life. As you have a family and kids, and maybe if those kids want to go to college, and everything you'd ever need, he's put in that vault. He's provided for. But the challenge is the vault is passcode protected, and that passcode changes every single day, and maybe multiple times a day, to keep anyone from getting in this vault that has all these, all this wealth in it, so to speak. Well, the good news is your father knows the passcode. You don't know the passcode. It's changing. You don't necessarily know it, but he knows it. And so it's not a problem. If you want to get into the vault that has everything, you go to your father, and he can tell you the code. You put in the code, you get what you need out. That's the analogy. Now, of course, the parallel we are drawing is how God has, as the word says, provided all things for life and for godliness, for us, for those who believe in him. He's already provided everything. So again, are you dealing with something in your life right now? The answer is yes. Everybody's dealing with something, right? Maybe you have some type of family thing going on, or maybe a question you need some wisdom, or maybe it's a financial thing going on, or a kid you're not quite sure how to handle the kid and to get them where they need to be, or maybe it's a spousal issue, or whatever the case may be. I'm saying those are just life things, and the Lord's provided for that. He provides answers and wisdom, and He can provide what you need, essentially. But we have to go to Him. We go to Him through prayer, through reading the Word, through putting ourselves, our time, our attention, our focus on Him in various ways. Praise and worship, and not just going to church. It's not about checking a box. It's an opportunity to sit under a minister who should have the anointing and grace of God on their life to speak, so that the Lord can use what they say and impart things to you and me, so we can take it away and go, oh, I didn't realize that the Lord really, pressed something on me in church today, And so He does this through different ways, but the point is we seek Him out because, of course, we should be seeking Him out because we love Him, because we want to know Him. If your father, in the analogy, has the access codes to the vault, but the only time you ever call Him is just to get access codes for something you want out of the vault, that's a very superficial relationship. I call that being a gold digger, right? Christian gold digger. I'm just pursuing you because of what you have. I want what you have in my life, so yeah, let's talk. That's not the way it should be, obviously. We should be, using the analogy, we should have a great relationship with our dad. We should be calling him, just catching up with him. Hey, how's your day going? These type of things. If we have a working relationship like that with him, then it's no problem to say, by the way, I need to get in the vault. What's the new code? And you get in the vault and get the code. Because why? He put the stuff in the vault for you. It's not there for anybody else. It's there for when you have a problem, when you need wisdom, when you need finances, when you need these things. But that shouldn't be our major focus. So let's talk about our focus shouldn't be the stuff, it should be Him, and along with Him comes the stuff, the provision is what I'm saying. So let's talk a little bit about, let's go back into the reading that we've been doing and tie this in. So the last thing we talked about in the last broadcast was a very short definition of how faith works. A very short, I wouldn't even call it a definition, kind of an explanation. And I'll read it again, and we'll jump off from there. It said, if we will earnestly pray, and sometimes even fast. I mean, if something's important to you enough, you'll put away even food, and you'll just move everything out of your life and say, listen, everything's got to stop. I don't want to be distracted by meals. I don't want to be distracted by people. I don't want to be distracted by all this stuff. I just need to be alone with the Lord. That's the purpose of fasting. It gives you an opportunity to clear the world and the clutter, get close to Him. But if it's, and again, I'm not saying you need to fast every time you need an answer. You're not trying to earn anything. It's just sometimes you need to clear the deck so you can hear Him. And so if we will earnestly pray and fast about our situations of concern or interest, we can receive communication from God. Once we have received or perceived God's response to us, huge, we can choose to believe what we receive from Him is true. He makes an impression on us, do this, say this, operate in this way, and we go, I'll do it. Okay? Now, perceiving a communication from God and believing it is the beginning of our faith. It doesn't necessarily start with the perception. It really starts a lot of times with us searching Him out. And so we can get the perception, but ultimately you have to have the perception of God, something from Him, and then you can go forward from there. Okay? So in other words, this is really big, and hopefully it's not overly deep, but this stuff is exciting for me to learn because it took a lot of the unpredictability out of faith, out of walking with God. Because before I learned these things that God, God's consistent, faith is consistent. It's based on spiritual laws that can be counted on. It wasn't hit or miss. You want a perfect example of faith, obviously Jesus is the perfect example of faith. Was His life hit or missed? Sometimes when He said, be healed, they were healed. Sometimes it didn't. You never really know. No, that's not the way it works. And so that's not the way it's supposed to be. Supposed to be. It's not the way it's supposed to be in our lives. In my life, before I learned that faith was consistent and worked on principles, it was hit or miss, okay? And so I'm trying to break this back down, pass on what I learned so that it'll hopefully benefit you, okay? So, but to the reading, it says, faith does not start with us coming up with something in our own mind and choosing to just believe, it will happen. That phrase is very common in Christian circles, and I've said it myself in the past before I learned better. I would say, you know what? I'm just going to believe that's going to work out. I'm just going to believe the money's going to be there. I'm just going to believe that I'm going to have a parking spot at wherever, when I go to the mall today. I'm just going to believe, and we just throw it out. I'm just going to believe. I'm just going to believe. Now, what is that believing based on? I remember one minister said, it's wise to ask yourself, what is my faith based on? What am I believing? I'm believing something based on what? Am I just making it up? Okay. So in other words, back to the reading, in other words, if you believe, you're just going to believe, you can walk on water. Just because you read that the Apostle Peter walked on water, you're going to go out there and try it. You're likely going to get very wet if you try. Real faith begins with gaining, as I said, a supernatural revelation from God, just as Peter did when he walked on water. Supernatural results. Walking on water is supernatural. That's not the way it naturally works. It requires a supernatural beginning. Okay? Now, of course, when I say something like, if you're just going to believe you're going to walk on water, hey guys, if you're taking me with you, I'll grab a towel because you're going to need it, But I'm just going to believe and go walk on this water. We all pretty much expect you're about to go under, okay? But that's not any different than I'm just going to believe anything else. I'm just going to make something up. I just believe that situation is going to work out. Situations don't always just work out. That's absolutely not true. You can look at people's lives all around you. You can look at tons of situations in the Bible. You can read Old Testament. You can read New Testament. And you're going to see a lot of lives and things destroyed. But on the other hand, when God says something and then people acted on what he said, you see those situations work out. So I was reading a commentary, a biblical commentary on what faith is, and I like what it said so much, I'm going to read it to you. It's pretty brief. The commentary said, faith is always a gift from God and never something that can be produced by people. In short, faith for the believer is God's divine persuasion, and therefore distinct from human belief, which i.e. confidence. It's distinct from just human confidence. Yet it involves it. It involves human belief. It involves human confidence. That's big. It's distinct from human belief. I'm just going to walk on the water, but it involves it. So Peter says, Lord, if that's really you on the water, bid me to come to you. And the Lord said, Jesus said, come. Now Peter has heard from the Lord to come and walk on the water, and now he believes him. It involves Peter's belief. And Peter is confident enough in his belief that he steps out onto the water. So it's distinct from human belief, but it also involves human belief. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense. Going back to the commentary, it went on to say, the Lord continuously births faith in the yielded believer. Don't lose those words there. The yielded believer. My life is yielded. I'm willing to hear. I'm listening for him. Peter said, if it's you, bid me to come. He yielded himself to the words of Jesus. The Lord continually births faith in the yielded believer so they can know what he prefers, i.e., the persuasion of his will. This is the victory that overcomes the world, even our faith. That's 1 John 5:4. This is the victory that overcomes the world. Now, that sounds like a very wonderful statement, very pretty. This is the victory that overcomes the world. But what's the world? The world is all the junk. Cancer, that's of the world. Depression, that's of the world. Anxiety, lack, pick an issue, whatever's going on in your life. Ask yourself, is this going on in heaven? Do they deal with this in heaven? If the answer is no, then it's of the world. And so when we're in the world, we have to deal with the world and the way the world works. It's a temporary situation, thank God, but it is our current situation. I think we're back. Apologize, I lost you. Apparently I lost internet connection, which never happened. So there you go. But not to be dissuaded, we are back, picking up where we left off. And so I'm just going to dive right back in. And I was speaking about how while we're on earth, our faith is what overcomes the world, which according to the Bible. And you can, of course, look that verse up on Google if you're not familiar with it. But I was saying this is the world that we're living in. And the world for a believer is very much like a tour of duty for a soldier. I know my brother, for example, I have lots of relatives in the military, but my brother, I remember him being in Afghanistan. And guess what? He was there for a certain period of time to do a job for the Army, and he wanted to get back home. And that's the way it is for believers. You know, our home is really heaven, and that's where we really belong. That's where we fit in. That's where, that's where we're headed. But while we're here on a mission specifically to do something for the Lord. So if we're going to be here, just like my brother needed certain weapons and certain training to do his job, we need certain weapons, we need certain training in order to operate in faith, right? And of course, our main weapon being like are the word, sword of the Spirit, the spoken word of God, inspired by God, spoken out. That's a whole different topic for a different time, but we need this training. And so that's why we're talking specifically about faith, because this passage in James that we're going over is talking about how do we plan the future? Not necessarily how do we plan the future, but how do we approach the future if we're not going to plan it ourselves? Faith, being able to plug into the Lord and hear from Him what we should do, where we should go, what we should not do, what we should say, what we shouldn't say, who we should be connected with, who we shouldn't be connected with, what opportunities we should take, what opportunities we should turn down. All these different things. Do I put my kids in school? Do I homeschool them? Do I put them in public schools? Do I put them in private schools? Do I, with all the stuff going on in the world around us, what do we do? We should not be, and I say we should not, we have to be trained, but we shouldn't be like non-believers, people who don't have any access to the vault of God. If they can't get wisdom from Him because they don't know Him, they can't get provision from Him, they don't know Him, so on. We shouldn't be that way. We have a resource, we have a somebody that we can access if we will learn how to access Him, so to speak. And again, it's not about just accessing Him for the things He can give us. I always reiterate that because I never want to, think about if I was talking about you and I was telling people they should get to know you because of what you could do for them. It'd be terrible. So in the same way, I don't want to talk about God in the sense that it's like, just fleece Him for what He's got, man. Teach you the code, It's so wrong. So anyway, all right, let's keep moving forward. In case you didn't know, God's an actual person. He's a being. Okay? All right, going back to my reading. I said, oh wow, please excuse me. Apparently in all my hustle and bustle to get back on here, I moved my spot from where I need to be on my notes. So I said, in line with what I was just talking about, once we receive a revelation from God, we can begin to speak and act on what we believe in our heart. Make sure I'm not repeating myself. This makes it just, right, and legal for God to bring to pass in our life certain things through our actions of faith. Now, when I said that just, right, legal, it makes it just, right, and legal, that is one of the key things. There's so much packaged into that. It would be so worth your while to start understanding or searching out the legalities of spiritual, the legal, the legalities of the Spirit. How the spiritual world works. In other words, why doesn't God just fix everything? Why doesn't He do that? There's a reason for that, because He has the power to. But the short answer you'll have to do more research into is He doesn't give Himself legal access to. There's a difference between what you can do by a power and authority and what you illegally do. So a police officer. They could walk up to any door in any neighborhood. They have the power to kick in a door, an able-bodied police officer, and make everybody do something, at gunpoint. They have the ability to if they have a firearm. They don't have a legal right to do that. Okay? So does God have the power to fix everything in your life, in my life, and so on? Yes, but faith, us believing Him, gives Him a legal right to do it. And that's why it's like there's so many issues in the world, because last I checked in Genesis, God gave Adam and Eve jurisdiction, legal right over the planet Earth. And God's not the one to say, okay, I'm going to give you legal right over something. Oh, you're not handling it well. Never mind. I'll just take that back. If you want to see what it looks like when God is working his power and it's not where he has complete access, because, and this is the way he set it up. You understand that people are like, God's sovereign. He can do anything. Yes. He sovereignly, the way he decided to do it is to set it up under rules and legalities. And so if you want to see what that looks like where God's totally in control, look at heaven. God's totally in control up in there, and there's not sickness, there's not disease, there's not poverty, there's not all these issues, there certainly isn't COVID. And let me tell you, they're not wearing masks up in heaven. Okay, there'd be no reason to. And so when you look at the earth, you got people running things down here. And if you want God involved in your life, you're going to have to give him legal access to operate in your life. And we do that by faith. So Mark 11:22 through 26 speaks about that concept. And it talks about, this is where Jesus specifically said, speaking effective words of faith begins with praying and believing what God reveals to us through our prayers. I'm going to say that again. That was Jesus. You can go read the passage for yourself. We'll go over a little bit here. In fact, I'll read it. But it begins with praying and believing what God reveals to us and speaking what he says to us. I said earlier that words are a weapon. It's one of, it may not have, you may or may not have caught, I don't know exactly when the video ended, but words are a spiritual weapon that we use, okay? So let me read Mark 11:22 to 26, and that's going to be pretty much, we'll explain that a little bit, and I think that's going to be it for tonight. So Jesus answered and said to them, have faith in God. That is, receive faith from or of God. When he says have faith of God, a better way of saying that is receive faith or the God type of faith. That's really what Jesus was saying. Have the faith of God. And there's certain translations that put it that way. Young's literal translation, literal standard version is another translation. So moving on. Jesus continued to say, truly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, be taken up and thrown into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes what he says is going to happen, it will be granted to him. Now, a lot of times when I first heard that, it was kind of like, so I'm just supposed to start saying, hey, this happened, and you mountain move, and all this different stuff. No, because there's no confidence in your heart. Why is there not confidence in your heart? Because you've made your mind up. You said, you know what? I'm just going to believe I'm getting a brand new car. The God is going to bless me with a brand new car. And God wants me to have good things. So I want a brand new car and a brand new house and this different stuff. And I'm just going to start speaking it. Well, you can mentally convince yourself that that's going to work. And then you can take your own efforts and go and procure yourself a car. It's going to probably have a lot of issues in terms of, maybe you leverage yourself too much in debt and whatever. We can add things to ourselves and say that God gave it to us, but that's not what Jesus is talking about here. He says, have the faith of God. He hears it, and then you act upon it. In this case, you act upon it by speaking, okay? A huge difference. So, moving on, Jesus says, after he says all this talking, he says, whoever says to this mountain, be taken up and thrown into the sea, and doesn't doubt in his heart, but he believes what he says is going to happen. Yeah, he believes it because he heard it from God first. It will be granted to him. Therefore, Jesus goes on, what he's about to say next is because of what he just said. Therefore, I say to you, all things for which you pray and ask, believe that you have received them, and they will be granted to you. So where did it really start? With speaking to the mountain? Not really. He says, pray, and when you receive those things, believe it. Believe them. Yes, I prayed about this. I got an answer from God. I believe that answer. Now I'm going to take action, and I'm going to start getting my words in gear. In other words, sickness. If you are dealing with something in your body, sometimes sickness is progressively pushed out of our body. Sometimes the Lord just, bam, his power hits and something's taken care of. And I've had that happen in my life. But more often than not, it's been like getting in the Word and reading and seeing Revelation and saying, look, 1 Peter 2:24, by his stripes I have been healed. Or Isaiah 53 talks about, that same thing. And reading it and putting it in our mind, till something, which is the Spirit, that there's a revelation, and you'll go, wait a second, hold on, I really am healed. It's not just that I memorize these verses. This is powerful. This is real stuff. And you go, you know what? There's a revelation, an epiphany that you didn't have before. You go, I am healed. This problem, this cancer, this sickness, this disease, this whatever it happens to be, this ailment, this issue, it can't stay. And you start speaking those things. You start speaking it, not because you're just saying it, but because you're believing it, and you just keep reiterating that. Now, I'll give you a good little tip. You already do that. If you plan on going to work tomorrow, and you're talking to someone, they're like, hey, something, like, oh, I'm at work tomorrow, I can't do that with you. They're like, well, why don't we go over here tomorrow and do this? And then like, oh, I'm going to be at work. Because you believe, you're convinced you're going to be at work, so you're speaking it out of your mouth. You're not there yet. That is a certain type of natural faith. It's like, if you plan on some people with their kids going to college, or planning on their kids going to college, what do? They start preparing. They start putting the money aside. They start talking to their kids about college. That's a natural type of faith. It's something that hasn't happened yet, but you're already talking about it because you're convinced that it's going to happen. Spiritually speaking, no different. Once you've been convinced through the Word of God, and I don't mean just the reading, but there's something, the spiritual Word of God, maybe it starts with reading, you become convinced. And once you become convinced, you start talking like you're convinced, like, yeah, this sickness can't stay. This disease, it just can't stay. And so you take it to the Lord in prayer, and you pray about it, and you really get alone with the Lord, and eventually you can get an answer that way. And then it's like, I've got an answer, and I know this is going to happen. There's confidence there. So again, it's hard to explain spiritual things in natural terms, but that's an explanation if I could give it to you. Okay. So I said we're going to take that passage, and I think we'll leave it there for tonight. And then maybe next time we'll get to kind of finish, because there's not much more of this to go as far as the writing is concerned. But I feel like that's a good chunk anyway, because, again, digging into really understanding, and you can kind of define for yourself, maybe sit down and it's like, what do I think faith is? What have I thought faith is? And as always, there's going to be some people that you have a very specific working definition of what faith is to you, and it's operating. You're seeing the results. I would encourage you that if you don't see the results of faith, then you're probably not operating in faith, and that's from personal experience. Because Jesus didn't imagine people were healed. He didn't imagine he was walking on the water. He didn't try to take results that were undesirable and then just try to Photoshop them and go, yeah, that must be what God wanted. Yeah, that must have been my faith, got me this whatever the situation is. And it's really not a desirable situation. And I'm saying from lots of experience, I've done that, put my hand up high, done that. But if you have a real understanding the concept of faith, and some people do, you'll know, because there's going to be results in your life. But if you don't, then you're probably operating off of different concepts, maybe things that you've been taught, maybe some things you've heard here and there, but it's never become real to you. And therefore, it's very unlikely you're going to rely on faith to plan your day and plan your future and plan your, not plan and wait for the Lord to operate. Wisdom of the Lord and things like that to operate. If you really don't understand it and grasp it, again, from personal experience, you're not going to try to live by it, especially when push comes to shove. When push comes to shove and something's on the line, money, time, opportunity, you're going to go with what you believe in. And that's why for us as believers, it's so important that we dig in and we take the time to learn these things. And like I said, there are countless great resources out there that will teach these things. Feel free to message me if you'd like me to pass on some stuff that's helped me out. But what you do want to understand is that faith gives God the legal right to act in your life, to give you wisdom, direction, knowledge, help. And if you give him that legal right and you walk out whatever he tells you, then you are going to have good results in your life. You're going to end up in better spots than people who don't have that wisdom. Like people like, how does that happen for you? And then you're going to give them that mysterious answer, by faith. God is good, by faith. And a lot of times that'll go right over their heads. They're going to think, no, you're just lucky, or you're just giving credit to God, but really you're doing something on the back end. But deep down you're going to be like, no, trust me, that was God. I heard him and I did what he said, and I followed through. And that's how you avoid walking into traps, walking into bad situations, walking into things that look good on the front end, but on the back end turn out to be a total disaster. That's how you avoid such things, by learning to operate by faith. Okay, so that's it for tonight. And I am going to trust God that helped you. I apologize for the interruption on the connection there, but hopefully as we've jumped right back in, you were able to pick right back up. So love you guys, and we will see you next time. If you have found this teaching helpful, consider subscribing to the channel and click the notification bell. That way you'll be alerted whenever new content is released from the Faith, Hope, Love Initiative channel.